Bad Bunny's Super Bowl performance is a perfect example of them painting a vision of liberation while they are still oppressing us in the streets. They are consistently giving us visions and images of liberation as people of color. They are putting it in media so that we don't realize that we actually have zero liberation and we are actually going through massive oppression systemically here in this country. If they can make us believe that there's hope, if they can prop up images of hope, and the images of people being killed, displaced in the streets are going to be drowned out. Super Bowl halftime show is covering up all of the atrocities that are happening in underprivileged and underserved communities here in this country. It is all a distraction and it is all a guise for them to keep you complacent and satisfied while they are actually creating torment in the communities of people of color. If you are someone who has left-leaning politics, it's very important right now more than ever that we are beginning to understand nuance and we are being able to use our critical thinking. The Super Bowl halftime show was an event that painted images of liberation and empowerment, but Bad Bunny was given the platform that he was given by the very people who were in the Epstein files and the very people who would have everything to gain for our attention to be diverted from what is actually happening in politics right now and being put onto this entertainment event that happened. Today, we're going to be talking about the history of the Super Bowl halftime show and how it has become this event that is able to divert our attentions from the policies and the politics that are happening that are extremely harmful in our world right now, but more importantly, in our country. The Super Bowl halftime show went from being a boring intermission that would cause viewers to tune out of the network to now being one of the most talked about and most widely viewed events in America every single year. I 100% do not believe that it is a coincidence that they chose Bad Bunny, who is a Latin artist who heavily speaks about politics and who heavily talks about liberation for Latin people, as the Super Bowl artist during a really horrific time for the Latin community here in America. We are seeing people who are from Latin descent be deported, detained, displaced, and even killed by our American government. And we also just experienced 3.5 million documents being released in the Epstein files. I'm the type of person that questions everything. I'm the type of person that is always questioning motives, always seeing and looking at what organizations that preach empowerment have to gain, because what we are seeing right now is performative activism in the form of being able to divert our attention from talking about what's actually happening and instead look this way. As someone who really enjoyed watching the halftime performance, the one lingering thought that I had after watching it is, what are they diverting our attention from? What is happening in the government today that they are having us all tune into this sporting event to watch this performance? What are they trying to get us to look away from? And in further digging, I was able to see a few things. I was able to see that most of the people that would intentionally tune into the halftime show are people with left-leaning politics, are people that are enraged by what is happening to the Latin community here in America, are people who probably would be very interested and invested in the Epstein files, are people that support diversity, are people that support human rights, specifically those rights of immigrants and people that look differently than us and talk differently than us. And so by being able to use critical thinking in this case, I was able to see a few things. Whenever something happens in politics, as someone who works in an activist space online and as someone who's front-facingly vocal about my political views and my stances and the things that are happening in the world, and someone who's very educated on the things that happen in the world and how that's affecting the American people, what I find is each and every time something happens, it's a huge news story and then it fizzles out and no one is talking about it anymore. It's like a trend cycle that we are seeing happen in the news and with politics. And this can become very, very, very dangerous because I truly also believe that our attention span is being dwindled down to a 5, 6, 7 second attention span so that we do not have the capacity to be enraged enough about a certain event to be able to continue talking about it for an extended period of time, which that extended period of time would give us the ability to actually make actionable change. So when we're talking about everything that has happened just this month in politics, Renee Good was killed, Alex Preddy was killed, previously Keith Porter was killed, on top of dozens of Hispanic immigrants were killed by ICE, and the most damning thing that happened pop culturally very, 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 very recently is the Epstein files were released. And I remember the weekend that this was released, like a week ago from me filming this, everyone was talking about it. Everyone was enraged. Everyone was activated. And it was the activation that we needed to be able to fuel the revolution that we are seeing take place in the minds and hearts of the American people today. We need to hold our attention on the things that are happening that are wrong for actionable change to happen. And the government and people in charge know this. And when the Epstein files were released, everyone was rightfully enraged. But so often what I see with the trend of how news cycles work is we are enraged for a week and then the news fizzles off. This isn't a trend. This isn't something that can just be swept under the rug. But what people are in charge are banking on is your ability to forget and not have the attention span necessary to be able to actually make actionable change about the things that are taking place, because we're so focused on the next rush, the next dopamine hit, the next news drama, the next newsworthy story, that we aren't able to hold energetic space for the things that are happening and the things that are revealed to us. The Epstein files revealed some very, very, very horrific things about people who are in charge, people who are in office, people who own these companies that honestly rule the country, right? So many people were mentioned in the Epstein files, and so many people had so much incriminating evidence put out there by the Epstein files. This is not a coincidence. The biggest Latin American artist performing at the Super Bowl is not a coincidence. It's just not. What a coincidence it would be. And how convenient is it that they chose him to perform at the Super Bowl of all time, of all artists even. And I'm not at all blaming Bad Bunny. This is not a Bad Bunny slander campaign. This is just saying two things can be true. He could be an amazing artist who absolutely deserved that stage, and he could have spread very empowering messages, because he did. Messages that I do believe that we need to hear and we do need to have on big stages. However, all of the people who were tuning into his message are people that already are enraged, are people that are already activated. This isn't sharing news to people who actually care and just are ignorant to the fact of what's happening in our country. It's impossible to live in our country today and not know what is taking place to immigrant communities and not know what is happening politically right now and not be informed in some way. And so this isn't an education purpose. That him being on that stage was not a purpose for education. It was a purpose for getting people to look. And the currency of energy, we have to understand, is the most potent and expensive form of currency that the American government and people in charge have. And so if our currency of energy is focused on the files, at some point, there are going to be people that are held accountable. And so many people were talking about the files and saying, why are there not indictments? Why are people not being arrested? And it's because they are banking on the fact that you are going to forget about it in a week. Unfortunately, with media becoming so much more accessible, two things have happened. We have become more informed, but we have also become very easy to distract. It's become so much easier for us to forget the things that are happening and to move on so quickly because we have so much access to so much information. Because we have to think about the Super Bowl as a business, the NFL as a business. The people who are in charge of many of the nation's biggest sporting franchises, like the NFL, were named in the files. And I'm looking at you directly to be able to get this to sink into your brain. Were named in the files, as well as a lot of the sponsors of these franchises, like the NFL. They were named in the file. On top of that, if you even just watched some of the Super Bowl ads, it was all propaganda. There was a whole ad in the Super Bowl that I watched and I fully believe is AI. Who else would be wanting to feed you this information except for people that are trying to indoctrinate you or distract you? The NFL had everything to gain by having Bad Bunny as the performer. And I'm here to tell you and wake you up to the fact that what they had to gain was not for you to feel more empowered, because you already feel that. They know that you already feel that. So they're just playing off of the emotions that you already are exhibiting. Everyone is pissed online that is on the left, and they know this. The people that run the NFL, they do not have your best interest in mind, and they have the final say on who performs at their game. They know that you are going to be tuned in and you are going to be listening and you are going to be engaged, and that the next day all anyone's going to talk about is the Super Bowl halftime show. Isn't that convenient? No, I'm genuinely asking, isn't that convenient? Isn't that really convenient timing for them to host this really major event that they know so many people are going to be tuning into? So many people for days and days and days, all they can talk about after the Super Bowl is the halftime show. So many people only tune in for the halftime show, like myself, right? I watched it on YouTube after the event. How convenient that they had an artist that they knew would speak politically. They knew the artist would have a lot to say that would enrage and empower, and they knew it would be so controversial both on the left and the right. So how convenient of a timing for them to choose an artist that they knew would activate people in a way that many could not during a time in which they are trying to cover up and divert our attention from what is happening politically and what has happened in the files. So in order to fully understand kind of how the Super Bowl has progressed into what it is today, we have to understand that the Super Bowl halftime show used to be so boring. The Super Bowl halftime show used to be so boring that people used to tune out during the halftime show and not return. And so they were losing viewership. They saw this as an issue. The Super Bowl halftime show used to be pretty similar to what it is if you just go to a regular NFL game or like a high school football game. It used to be like the band and maybe occasionally a pom girl. It definitely wasn't the event that we know it today. What changed is the NFL is a business, and like any business, they are trying to get your retention and the audience retention to last throughout the whole game so that they can get money for sponsors and etc. What they ended up doing is they started slowly introducing more of an entertainment show in the late 80s. They still weren't getting very much audience engagement, but this is kind of the build up to the Super Bowl halftime show as we know it today. So in the late 80s, the show was very theatrical, kind of quirky. They still didn't have live music as the center of it, and it wasn't until 1993 with Michael Jackson's halftime show performance that they really were able to change the way in which the Super Bowl was able to be viewed and the Super Bowl halftime show was able to be structured for decades to come. That performance with Michael Jackson drew in record-breaking audiences, and it was the first time that a Super Bowl halftime show was the cause for spikes in audience viewership. They were actually boosted because of the halftime show for the first time ever. So after that, the NFL, of course, as a business does, did what worked. They continued to book performances and major recording artists for the break in the game. So to understand how this is now a conspiracy or a tool for a bigger conspiracy that we are experiencing today, in my opinion, we have to understand the bread and circus strategy. So this strategy was coined by the Romans during a time in which there was a big wealth divide. A lot of Romans were unemployed and homeless and struggling. So the premise of the idea is that if people's basic needs such as food, shelter, and economic relief is met, paired with entertainment, they will be distracted and subdued enough to not revolt against the government. It was created during a time in which ancient Rome was structurally unstable, and they needed to get people's eyes and attention off of the fact that they were not serving the people in the way that they deserved to be served. In order to understand the bread and circus theory, we can understand that the Romans provided free grain to people who did not have accessibility to food, but then the circus is the entertainment. So the Romans hosted massive gladiator games. If you hear gladiator games, I'm sure you can picture the Colosseum, you can picture all the little garb that they would wear, like you can picture it, right? Because it's such a huge historical thing, and it's something that the Romans did to keep the Romans satiated. This is a theory that is very important to know because it's very important to look at how the US government is currently using this same theory to subdue us as an American people. We have bread, such as welfare assistance, food stamps. Bread is also can be considered like drive-through, fast, easy, cheap, accessible food, right? For those that are struggling, right? If we can keep them satiated, they won't revolt. The circus are things such as the Grammy, the Super Bowl, social media, the quick fix, the swiping, the endless swiping that you are able to do that is going to give you a dopamine hit at any time of the day. That is the circus. I think a lot of people think that the circus is politics. They think that politics is the distraction, but really politics is the thing that they're trying to distract you from. It's important to know and experience the understanding of nuance, specifically during a time as now, right? Because two things can be and are true. The Super Bowl halftime show was filled with extreme revolutionary energy, extreme emotion tugging, heart string tugging images. Things that were activating and empowering and I feel like unifying. I think after watching the halftime show, a lot of people on the left were like, fuck yeah, like let's go, let's be activated, let's work together as a people, right? For once in history. I think that that's true. And I will never take away from the fact that what we saw was revolutionary and was amazing and empowering. But the other side of it is, whenever something is so empowering that the whole world is looking at it, we have to start asking ourselves, what are they getting us to look away from? I think There are subtle ways to support and be in the activism sphere as a creative. I think when you are working side by side with a movement, such as going to protests as a public figure or making songs, like recently Harry Styles released Aperture, which is, I think, very subtly kind of political. When we see artist creations working side by side with a movement, I think that that's amazing. And I think that that's impactful. When we see artist creations overpower the images of a movement, that is when I think it can get harmful, because that can be used as a tool for the government to get you to look away from what's actually happening. If the government can fill us with energy of empowerment and liberation during a time right now, our brain processes that as the job is done. The job is far from done. We can look at what ICE is doing currently and understand that the job is far from done. The dopamine release that is released when we watch things such as the Super Bowl and we are filled with messages of empowerment and liberation can easily be mistaken as the job being complete and finished and there being no more work to do. It's extremely important that when we are watching really major things that we know are captivating our attention, that our energy is not solely put onto the acts of activism or the display of activism, but it's actually continuously still being able to be put towards actual activism and actual change being actualized in our society. I want to close out this video really pointing you to not just have this be the end of what you are hearing about these events and the bread and circus theory and all of those things. While these are topics that I talk about heavily a lot on my page, I want you to do your own research. I encourage you to do your own research, and I encourage you to critically think about what is happening in society right now, in politics right now. I encourage you to do the work. I encourage you to do the work that the government and people in charge do not want you to do not want you to have the brain capacity to do or have the energy to do. There's a reason why we are experiencing political fatigue right now, and it's because the government does not want you to have the energy to be able to critically think about what is happening so you can come to a solid conclusion that ends up leading your actions. I am going to have the Epstein files linked down below. I encourage you to go through them. There's 3.5 million pieces of evidence, so you will not be able to get through all of them, but I feel like the more eyes that we have on it, the more we are able to uncover about what is actually in the files. This topic was brought to my attention by Amanda Seales, who is an inspiration of mine. She is amazing. She has her own pages. She has her own videos and lives posted on her Instagram. I'm going to link her down below as just further resource, because that's what inspired kind of my take. And I think she's really powerful, and she hasn't been receiving the support that she deserves on this stance. But I really think it's important that we start to listen to people who have different views, because on the left, something that I am seeing so often is that we're so narrow and closed-minded to this is right, this is wrong, but everything has nuance, and we have to start understanding that in order to be able to further our movement towards progressive ideologies in politics. Please also drink your water and take care of yourself, especially if you are someone who is part of minority communities, whether you're a woman, part of the LGBTQ community, part of the Black community, whatever it is, part of the Hispanic community, Asian community, whatever you are a part of. Even if you're not part of a minority community and you're just doing the work and you are seeing what is happening in politics and you are enraged, I encourage you to drink water, take care of yourself, rest, take time offline, put your phone down. That was the best thing that I could have done for myself this week, is just kind of take a break. You should not feel shame or guilt for taking a break, especially when you are doing the work to be present in what is happening in politics. As always, I am going to have all of my links down below to my other socials. I have TikTok, Instagram. That is the only other socials that I am active on. I am also a spiritual life coach who works with underprivileged, underserved communities to work through trauma to be able to make the life of your dreams actually accessible through manifestation techniques, mindset work, and trauma therapy. So go ahead and click the link down below if you want to book a free clarity call with me. My books are currently open, so I would love to have some new clients in my books. And that being said, go ahead and comment your thoughts down below. Go ahead and like, subscribe, share, do all of the things to be able to push this video, because this information is super important for more people to hear about. And I will see you guys next time.